We're going to go straight into the agenda. First of all, thank everybody who's here, members of the public. You're more than welcome to stay all the way through the meeting, but I don't think the meeting is going to be tremendously long. If we move on to item 1, apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Hebb will not be with us this evening. I don't think there's any other. No, just Councillor Hebb. Excellent. So move to item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting that wasn't held, on the 8th of September. Sorry, it was on the 8th of September. As outlined in the agenda. Is that all agreed? So I'm trying not to sneeze. Yeah. Thank you. Item 3, to move if there are any items of urgent business, and confirm that there are no items of urgent business this evening. Moving on to item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening in relation to any of the matters that we will discuss and make decisions upon? None? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to item 5, which is my statement. So, as I said, welcome those either online or indeed here this evening. COVID update. We have seen a steady decrease in the borough's COVID rates, with a significant drop over the last week. But we must be mindful that it was half term, and with a large reduction being under 18s group, it's likely to have had an impact. So it's very important that we continue to look out for each other, protect each other, and especially in cold weather means that hospitals and other medical services may well get busier. One of the best ways to do this, alongside taking the precautions where we can, is by taking up the offer of a vaccine. This is our best defence against getting seriously ill as a result of contracting COVID-19. I will again thank all of our residents for doing everything they can, protecting each other and supporting each other as part of the community, which they've been doing for the past 18 months through this pandemic. Just to touch on the figures briefly, the 7-day infection rate is down from 359 per 100,000 last week to 278 this week, meaning we're now ranked 124th out of the 144 upper tier local authorities, where number 1 is the highest rate. So we're heading in the right direction. Moving on to the free pool, which is really good news. Obviously, this is really just an update for everybody at the same time. In the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 extremely exciting announcements about the most significant projects in the borough. Thames Free Pool. Firstly, it was included in the budget statement and spending review, which means the Thames Free Pool will be able to begin operations from later this month. Then, a few days later, the Right Honourable Ruth Kelly was announced as the inaugural chair of the Free Pools. And these 2 momentous steps in something which is going to be generating more than £4.5 billion in new public and private investment and create more than 21,000 jobs, with significant investment in infrastructure skills to communities. It will also come hand in hand with improved health and cultural benefits, and will send out clear signals to residents, local businesses and investors, education providers and entrepreneurs that Thurrock is truly open for business. This is really exceptionally good news. Unfortunately, we still are seeing antisocial behaviour issues in some of our high streets. We do continue to try and crack down with this with our partners with Essex Police. Indeed, with a few projects coming up in the coming weeks that will help with that. And of course, as it starts to get darker, people start to feel not the best idea to walk through the town centre, or the more people walk through the town centre, the safer it is. But if they do see any antisocial behaviour, obviously they can call 999 if it's serious, or they can do a digital 101 when they get home, which allows us to report non-emergency crime and antisocial behaviour straight on the Essex Police website, without having to wait in a queue or submit long forms. At the end of last month, we did launch our Shop Safe radio scheme, which means the shops in Grays are now linked through a radio system, allowing them to stay in touch and share information in real time, and to share this with the police. It started off a little bit slow, but now it's in regular use with a vast majority of the shops using it quite regularly. In addition to this, our officers continue to join our community on every 3rd Friday of the month in Grays High Street to get to know their concerns and offer appropriate support where we can, and obviously to help log where the antisocial behaviour is happening, not just in Grays Town Centre, but right across the borough. Tomorrow, 11th of November, once again, sees recognise Remembrance Day as we pay our respects and remember those who've given their lives for our country and our freedoms. Throughout this week and across the coming weekend, a number of events will be held across Thurrock, details of which are available on the website, so residents can pay mark their respects accordingly. After the restrictions of lockdown for this time last year, it will be fantastic to see people being able to come together safely and remember the fallen. I especially look forward to attending a special memorial event on Sunday the 14th at the Grays Memorial to pay my respects. I know many will be joining me or indeed joining their local communities at their local memorial sites. Excuse me. But looking ahead for the future years, I really would like to thank the Reverend Canon Darren Barlow from St Peter's Paul's Church in Grays for leading the group to begin planning for how Thurrock as a community will mark this day in years to come. As always, our history here in Thurrock is of such importance to us and the community, and indeed a number of people have expressed already their willingness to help out in the coming years with organising the event not only at Grays but also elsewhere across the borough. The Reverend Canon Darren Barlow will be putting out a call for volunteers as well on the day. As well as we put something out in my weekly address on Friday. Clean it, cut it, fill it. We've managed to fill 2,391 potholes across the borough with more than 99% of them within agreed timeframes. We've cleared over 50 fly tips, 53. I think that number's increased today. Removed 1,170 tonnes of waste from our streets and other public areas. Issued 2,338 fixed penalty notices for littering and other various offences across the borough. And in closing, I've just finished a tour of the new office building, and I have to say, and I'm sure you've seen many of those with me nodding their heads, and Councillor Coxon was there earlier, how fabulous it looks. It really is. It's a lot of thought has gone into that building, and it is, you know when that's finished, it's going to look lovely. Some of the views, even like in a winter's night, were fantastic from the chamber, or indeed from the upper floors. The layout of the ground floor is really good. It will have those reception areas for those people who find themselves homeless and waiting to be housed where it's discreet and they can sit without worrying about losing their possessions and feeling embarrassed. Plus, of course, the other workspaces, the areas for people who wish to be married as part of the registrar's service. Big, open, lovely buildings just for those that didn't manage to get there. Also, that'll be connected, so if they've got relatives that can't make it to start, season can't make, they'll still be able to take part in the wedding. Absolutely fantastic. Everything else. That will be ready for a full council meeting in January, which will be so really.
Yeah, it's just about the registrars. Obviously, there's a point with the registrars moving to this will be the first time to registrars for us. So previously, there has been within our services, and it's really good that we service design and garden services there. I went through today, and it's fantastic, and it's open to hire and. Get married there very shortly, and I think that's a great thing that we can service it at an offer instead of a small service in the corner. Fantastic work. I think now is an opportunity to go out and excel that great service that we actually support people who don't want to get on. We want to just be married, and it's a great opportunity there.
And it was just that the whole layout, so the bride can come in private, so then gets to. It's just that someone's actually sat there and thought this through.
There's loads of opportunities. There are loads of opportunities for certain services, different sizes, different rooms. I'm saying like I'm principal now. Great services, and I think you need to meet the officers when we meet and bring up to great service.
Yep. and obviously with the CO1, which is facing the building to the right, pretty much have the goes now. I walked through it with to see how poor it is, and it's certainly not. So, after that's replaced with homes, the better. So moving on to briefing on policy, budget and other issues. That's different.
Just briefly, that I've brought in front of everybody as they can see the new posters that we've got going out into our parks and open spaces, encouraging people to use our bins, reminding people they will get fined if they drop litter. We've got zero tolerance. And also, big message, I was delighted to meet with some of our teams recently in Bondgate Park who are putting these posters up. It really helps them. If people do take their litter home, do put it into the bins, it helps them keep our green and open spaces clean and tidy for everybody.
Yeah, it's obviously people decided coming around and checking out our borough for cleanliness, and it's in the upper quartile, which is absolutely great. There are other projects that we've got going, you know, with the stickers and so on, which we'll start rolling that out in the coming months. You kind of notice it a lot more now that how tidier Greystown Centre is, rather than Chief Executive and I first took a walk on the Thursday after I was elected leader, and we were sort of battling rubbish in the street. That's just, you know, it's just a thing of the past, and long may that be the case. Yeah. And Frank residents are actually using bins rather than risking the 2,338 that have been fined for not doing so. I'd like to see that number down as a minimum, not because we're not issuing them, because we don't have to issue. Yeah. Any other briefings on policy, budget or other issues? Councillor Spillman?
Yeah, you might have seen in the news the first two Husk buildings were up and running. A wonderful little scheme. Residents, I was lucky to cut the ribbon, meet the residents. They were absolutely delighted. They've been living in homes that were ill-suited for their mobility needs, and they were absolutely made up. Those homes would be beautiful inside. I was really, really impressed. I've seen images as they've been built, as it had gone along, but to go there and see the finished article was a real, it was a real privilege. So it was really good fun. Another little scheme that we've got in formation, I set off as a challenge of, I mean, a lot of people come through the homeless department, and a huge percentage of them are not in education or training. So I've set the department the task of putting together a scheme to get a lot of the people that we come into contact with into jobs, into apprenticeships, and first feedback I've got from them, I've been really impressed with what I've delivered. So I'm hoping we're going to be able to announce something quite special on that. It's not just housing that affects. If we can get these people coming into our services, into well-paid jobs, developing, it's going to make savings across the board, whether it be health, social care, housing in the future. So it's a really nice scheme that we're working on, and just watch the space for that.
It's really good to see, you know, cabinet working across portfolios. Yeah, none of us sit alone. So, you know, Luke and I will, you know, deal with antisocial behaviour, both housing and out in the street in general. You know, everybody's engaged with Mark or with Shane in relation to finance or assets and so on. So it's really good, and obviously it's more importantly, it's going to be outcomes for residents. Let's say 21,000 jobs that are going to come. Not all of them are going to be in Thurrock, we know that. It's spread over boroughs like us, Havering, Barking and Beckman, but the lion's share is here. So can't think of anything better than, you know, waking up, working in the same borough, spending your money in the same borough, you know, playing in the same borough, and doing everything, you know, in Thurrock, rather than trotting off to London, doing it all in London, and then back and just sleeping here. We can't have a dormitory society. We don't have that. So Mark's work and play in Thurrock is this is the kind of joined up thinking that we really, really appreciate. One of the things you've got to remember, of course, is those new houses were built on the old garages that were there, which were a cause of all sorts of problems, antisocial behaviour. So we've got two problems: antisocial behaviour, less, two people in adaptive houses that need them.
And as I mentioned, two 2 less homes built on Greenbelt as well. Yeah?
Exactly. Exactly. So, well done all. Any other briefings before I move on? No? Okay, so we'll move on to petitions submitted by members of the public. Casey,
None.
None?
No,
Questions from non-executive members?
none.
None. Matters referred to cabinet for consideration by overview scrutiny. I believe that Councillor Bristol is, I can see that she's joined us, so she'll be doing that at item 11, I believe. And so we'll move on to item 10, which is the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force update. And for that, as always, over to Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Cabinet. This is a brief report detailing the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force meetings between June and September of this year, during which time I've had a community impacts consultation, and Highways England have now rebranded to become known as National Highways. So National Highways, you know who I mean. In June, some of the 57 mitigations as part of the economic mitigation list were discussed at the meeting. As expected, some of these are easier to secure than others, and it will be an ongoing theme throughout meetings throughout the year. The task force initially heard for the items that National Highways reported they could not be taken forward. These included the LTC hypothecation of charges, legacy housing. Concern was raised by members in relation to these points, especially the ability for the borough to shoulder the burden of the increased need of properties related to the Lower Thames Crossing workforce. These points, the Council would continue to engage with National Highways to see if further progress could be achieved. In July, National Highways attended virtually and gave a presentation on the summer community impacts consultation. At the time, they expected to be resubmitted to DCO in the winter of 2021. One new aspect of the consultation included ward impact summaries, which include a lot of overview information on how each ward in the borough, which was considered to be impacted, may be affected. Members raised concern initially that Stamford Hope and Chadwell St Mary were not included for National Highways LTC events. I'm pleased to report after the meeting, National Highways did indeed add these locations for consultation events. The consultation took place very much as the country was unlocking from the pandemic, and as such, members would have liked to have seen more in-person events with material available to view for those without internet or the relevant hardware to view at home. Also, the health and equalities impact assessment was discussed. The senior consultation explained it put forward potential changes to the methodology and hope National Highways would consider them, although he explained this type of work is months in the making, ongoing, and includes Public Health England. The serious issue of COPD along the route and how populations are clustered and could be affected was discussed. The senior consultation added that the Thurrock Council had communicated their methodological criticisms, and Thurrock Council had felt the methodology behind the health and equalities impact assessment had not been adequate, and hoped version 2 of the health and equalities impact assessment would meet the necessary standards. Moving on to the meeting in August, National Highways were again in attendance to update the task force on the consultation. They explained the 2 locations I mentioned earlier were added to the consultation events. Members were concerned that as it was being carried out over the summer holidays, in the length of the consultation, National Highways said they were quite satisfied as it is running for 8 weeks rather than the statutory 28 days. At this point, the number of 1,900 responses were being received. National Highway said this is higher than both previous consultations when looking at the same time frame. 25 written questions were submitted to National Highways from the task force, which National Highways agreed to give answers, included but not limited to areas of economic benefit of the LTC, housing, employment, tunnel ventilation, traffic speed, air quality, vibration and noise, historic landfill, watercourses, consultation engagement, road closures, public rights of way, utility and site working hours. As the answers to these questions are running to well over 20 pages, members can view the meeting minutes for the detail in those responses. September's meeting was held in the Beehive due to the flooding of the council chamber building, the main item being the Thurrock Council consultation response. This response was a 17-page short summary, 100-page overall summary, and 500-page technical appendices. The senior consultant explained that Thurrock determined the proposed route would negatively impact local connectivity, reduce the ability for housing development in the area, and have a large impact on the local road network. And that there was not enough detailed mitigation included in the consultation for the proposed increase in traffic that would be seen during the construction phase and at the route's opening. In terms of the Development Consent Order, DCO, The senior consultant explained that all of the DCO requirements, except for the traveller site detail design, had to be approved by the Secretary of State under the current proposals, but Thurrock officers are pushing this to be amended so approval could be granted by Thurrock Council. The main data Thurrock was still awaiting is the traffic modelling stats. There was also discussion around the relation of peak travel hours, for which the data in Thurrock is different from the modelling National Highways are using. We reported that 2,700 persons have completed the consultation to date, which I think is an amazing number, and I thank residents for keeping those numbers high throughout the consultations. And followed up by the task force unanimously agreed report recommendations that response be taken forward submission. October's meeting was not held in respect of the late Sir David Amos MP, and November's task force meeting is due to be held on Monday the 15th of November. This concludes the report to Cabinet for Lower Thames Crossing Task Force.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. You not got those 20 questions?
No, they're all on the website.
I'll pass it out to members. Councillor Coxall.
Yeah, I quite agree. I quite agree with the early submission when it went down. I'm disappointed with the Hatch report, and one of the biggest disappointments is the legacy housing. If you look at large national highway sites and what their sites they end up with are homes on sites and containers, and that's not how people should be living in containers for many years. And if we look at the Olympics as an example, this is where it come from, that there is legacy afterwards, after these bigger major construction sites and after the use, there's legacy left in the place. In the venue afterwards, and so we offer Stanford and some other sites that we could actually build out at speed, and then there could be houses for these workers, the new workers that are going to be in our community for a long while, instead of just isolated in containers on the site that's 29 now. There's still, that site is still there after many years of road widening. It's been finished for years, and it's still a site that's unsightly. I don't think we want that locally, and the construction and then the legacy of that is an unsightly site that's never going to be put back. I think really they should really look into that. I think it's a good idea. I think if they want to look at legacy here, they need to look at legacy, where the legacy is for Lower Thames Crossing, and take the Hatch more seriously in all items in it. And I'm very thankful for you pushing the same way as the chair of that. Hopefully can and hopefully you'll see sense before.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I completely agree. I think the last thing we want to see is containers, caravans, and more HMOs. We want good quality housing that can then be taken forward and used in the future for the borough's residents. So it's something that the task force will continue to bring up and take forward on national highways.
Yes, these construction workers can be living in our communities, and it'd be nice if they're near the communities to their houses afterwards. And I think it was a great idea. I think it should be brought forward. I think they should really look at that.
No, 100%. If we think, being one of those councils long enough to think back to when we won the Olympics, and there was a big push and excuses for building not particularly great accommodation, saying this is going to be ideal for the construction site, plus a bit of legacy afterwards, and actually it didn't really happen in Thurrock. In East Ham it did work really well. Why shouldn't it work here? So any other questions for Chair of the Committee? No, none. I'd also like to thank residents for keeping those numbers up. This is not, the more and more that we constructively lay out our reasons for saying no, the more and more we can actually work together with them to sort of either mitigate them or just make really clear that this is not the right thing for Thurrock. Whether it be slight changes or such really good changes, but if you do go down that legacy route, but being able to then to understand where we're coming from rather than that blanket no, it is really good, and I'm sure you've experienced it as well. Now, irrespective of the change of name to National Highways, the people that we're dealing with on that group are really engaging with Thurrock, and they understand where we come from. And actually, when we say actually that's not long enough for consultation, instantly that actually you're probably right. Let's do something else. So they're working with us, which is
as we move forward, we've got this interim to actually think about it again, because I still think considering each around the 2 years around the end. And I think you mentioned to touch on it, the connectivity to using the site and the housing numbers for our local plan next year. The connectivity, I think, is critical here where the task force to pull forward for that is look at this connectivity And whether at A13 that's only going one way, is it worth us having that junction at all? And that is the thing. Why build so much a big expensive billion pounds on a junction that affects majorly affects my colleague next to me, and then only goes one way to affect Stamford badly? We have to go to Stamford to turn around and come back. I think rethink. It would be a great opportunity now for the highways, no attempt across it, to rethink that and look at if there's a couple of connectivities around there for the Thurrock that can actually improve our local plan. And they've got this time now. The local plan's coming forward as a draft local plan. I think there's time for yourself as a group to look at legacy of it. Is it right where the connectivities are or what they're doing? Because I'd rather have if they're going to put a road through it, let's have a road through it with no connections to it, so it doesn't wreck our local network. Like that, I don't want that, but I'd rather that than actually a bad connection to it that actually does ruin our road network, make it break our local road network, and enhance the work we do in highways here in our highways department worse than actually having not one at all and just have a road through. And I think it'd be interesting to look at the connectivity there coming through and connecting to the local plan.
And if you think of the situation we are in now with Lakeside, with the out going west, coming back, and I've spoken to elected members and people who live out in South End, and the reason they don't want to go to Lakeside is not because they don't like Lakeside. It's great getting in, it's a complete mare to get out. We don't want to be, whoever's sitting in these seats, probably not here, but in our wonderful new chamber, in 20 years' time, saying we desperately need better connectivity both ways, and then the retrofit problems that we have afterwards. So it's certainly one thing to consider. Anything you'd like to come back on that, Chair?
Yes, please, Chair. Councillor Cottrell, the bit you were talking about mainly, the standards like the Stamford detour, where I completely agree. I mean, you have to take you up onto a roundabout then with traffic lights on it, just so you can come back the other way, and like you say, it wrecks part of our local connectivity. It's something I definitely take back to task force and focus on.
Let's say, what would it look like to not have that junction completely? I know that's counterintuitive, no connectivity to it, but I think we should really look at where the junction should be and take this opportunity, especially now the Freeport's come, and how we can get lorries not on the A13 onto that, connected to the Freeport, making sure lorries from the Freeport until routes 1, 2 and 3 don't get onto the link road. Can I really look at a link road to make sure it's away from Tilbury Town, away from Astor Roundabout, and away from the A13? I think that is an opportunity now. They've got this time. I think if you could look at that through the highway and ask for that, I think that would be helpful.
Excellent. So anybody got any other questions for Chair of the Items Task Force? No? Anything you'd like to say before I move to recommendations, Councillor Massey?
No, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. So with that, well, number one, obviously, before we move on to recommendations, thank you and your task force for the work they're doing. It's certainly as part of the multi-pronged attack on trying to make sure that if this is coming, it's going to come and it's going to work thorough, not work against us. Then it's clear now when I speak to them that they're fully engaged with this. I know it's in certainly reports that you'll be giving it. If you did it as a graph, you could see it sort of getting better and better and better and better and increasing. So that's absolutely great. So thank you, and again thank residents for keeping up the pressure when it comes to doing consultation returns. So with that, I'm going to move to page 15, recommendations at 1.1 that the Cabinet notes the work of the task force. Is that all noted?
No.
Noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Massey, what you wish to say, you can. Wish to leave? I'll give you a couple of minutes. Not with anyone other item.
Happy to stay, Chair.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 11, which is clean green service savings proposals. This is a report from Councillor Jeffries, but we've got Councillor Redsall online.
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't.
Yes, we have.
Yes, we have. We have.
Councillor for joining us. Just for clarity, the way that this will be dealt with, Andrew will introduce his report, and then he will ask for your feedback from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and then obviously if there are any questions you wish to ask and give answers to, that's absolutely fine, and then we as a Cabinet will have our same questions. So with that, Councillor Jeffries, if you'd like to give your report, please.
Thank you, Leader. So I will keep these brief, my remarks. So colleagues, you'll see that the Street Scene and Leisure Services have identified 2 savings that are being recommended to Cabinet. The savings are detailed in the table on page 2 of the report. The savings of 200k will be achieved by reviewing how, when and the frequency of cleaning and maintenance of our major roads, town centres and open spaces. Happy to take any questions and comments from the...
Okay, with that, Councillor Ritzel, would you like to give your input? Sorry, your camera's very low and all I can see is the very top of your head there.
There they are.
Look better.
So we'd like
Better.
to call as
Okay.
the chair of overview scrutiny, please.
Thank you. That was short and sweet, Councillor Jeffries. Thank you, Leader, and thank Cabinet for letting me speak tonight. On overview and scrutiny, this was discussed in depth. You can imagine wanting to understand who and what would suffer. We know that savings have to be made. That is logical in what we're in at the moment. It's asking what posts could become vacant, and is it possible to retrain the staff in other areas? Obviously, we asked what other savings have been put forward. And any staff that may be considered in the changes, are there any retraining schemes that they could be brought on board? Obviously, street cleansing is the one thing that everybody notices in the borough. What we don't want to see is a failure to fail. If what you are saying is instead of a 10-day turnaround, it's going to be 15, do you envisage that being a problem? We also obviously don't want our roads and paths to suffer with the cuts. We also have to remind the general public they've got to start, because it is general public on most of the fields and parks that do leave their rubbish everywhere, and somebody obviously has to clear up. We have to, get them in some way to take their rubbish home. Are there any ideas being put forward for a different kind of fencing to be used? Obviously, I've travelled up and down in quite a few counties, and they seem to be using this fencing that entwines with each other. What we're trying to do is use different types of fencing so that motorbikes can't get through. Everybody, I think, is in favour of the wildflowers, but not at the detriment of our open spaces. We can put all the flowers in as long as they don't overgrow, because that can be if we use them on, I don't know, the sides of roads, near roundabouts, it can be a problem. What was discussed also was there are many parks in the borough and we don't want them to suffer with the cuts. We're doing very well at the moment and people keep saying how nice they look. Cleaning and greening is in everybody's mind. It's what residents see in front of them. They're not really bothered sometimes about the big things that are happening. They're bothered about the little things that they can see. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ritzel. Before I move, open it up to Andrew to respond, and then Councillor Cox was indicating he wishes to speak. A separate meeting on Tuesday this week, we raised the issue with the motorbikes. There was a task force that I sit on with that, and I've suggested Tottenholz Hecke, which is a very nice German word for dead wood hedging. And it's not the same as the live interweave stuff that uses our coppicing and waste wood to build fencing. It's number one, it's very difficult to get through. Number two, it's also an absolutely fantastic wildlife sanctuary. So officers have looked that up and are looking to implement that in certain areas, especially those areas where it's wooded, because it's a natural complement for that. Just so, because I know I've not updated you since the last meeting on that. So, Councillor Jeffries, would you like to come back on?
Thank you, Councillor Redseal. Let me first of all assure you that, and I think I'll probably speak for my Cabinet colleagues as well, none of these cuts are intended to see a lowering of standards. As the leader said earlier on, we're proud of the fact that the Cleaner Greener has been a success and that our streets are certainly cleaner than when this administration was first elected. So that's not our intention, not at all. So hopefully I'll cover all of your points. I think I made enough notes. So with regard to the posts that are going, unfortunately I'm not allowed to see things like that, so I can't give you exact posts that are actually going. but I'm sure officers will follow all the appropriate employment laws to make sure that, you know, suitable employment is found elsewhere if somebody should be looking at losing employment. With regard to the actual street cleaning of our streets, our town centres, our parks, the idea is that, as the report says, we've got you know, machinery that we can now use, which is more efficient and quicker and can clean more. Also, officers are looking at when people actually go out and clean our parks. So, for example, you might say on a Tuesday and a Wednesday our parks aren't particularly used very much, but at the weekends, Friday, Saturday and Sundays and Monday mornings, that's when they're particularly dirty. So that's when we should be concentrating on cleaning those particular areas. I think the point you made about motorbikes, I think the leaders just covered that. Just one thing, I wasn't sure, what was the 10 to 15 days? I wasn't quite sure what you were referring to on that one.
Sorry, Andrew, from the icon, I've left it off. It said in the report that the turnaround that we clean at the moment with the roads is on a 10-day turnaround, and it's going to 15. I know it's only 5 days difference, but it could make the difference with the, you know, the rubbish that does, you know, get onto the roads, because obviously rubbish that has been either thrown by someone or moving onto the roads from the pavement. Yeah,
so again, that comes into the frequency and the type of equipment that we're using and when we're cleaning. So all of that is being looked into to make sure that, you know, our roads are swept when it's appropriate. I'm sure we can all identify roads that don't need sweeping as frequently as some of our other roads. So we need to take that into account as well. There was just the your mention of wildflowers and parks. The report that you've seen, it's not the intention to see things overgrown. The idea is to enhance our parks and our greens and our open spaces. So to give you an idea, you know, where you've got a verge between two roads, we're having to close roads, you know, slow traffic down to be able to go out and cut that grass, when really, with a bit of imagination, some planting of the right sort of wildflowers, right trees, bushes, whatever there is the correct planting, we then don't have to maintain that area as often as we do. Plus, it looks a whole lot better than just letting the grass grow and then having to close the road to inconvenience people. So no, it's not my intention to see anything overgrown or unsightly. The idea is to enhance and improve. And I'll just give you one other example, which was in the report as well that you're referring to, is where we've got lots of these little small hedges, small verges between footpath, verge and then road. There's the kind of planting that you can put in there that ground covers, and then we do nothing to it. We don't have to touch it for a whole year. So it means we're not having to cut the grass, and it looks a whole lot better than what it does at the moment. So hopefully that's reassured you.
It is. Leader, can I come back on one question?
Please do.
Thank you. It didn't mention in the report about our cleaning staff that go around the street cleaners, you know, that go around on their own, that don't seem to go up onto housing land. Is there anything that we can do to work with housing to encompass that, so they're not, you know, you haven't got one person coming out and doing the street cleaning and then bringing somebody else out to do garage areas or something like that, because the little street cleaners don't go round by the garages. And what I'd like to see is, I really want to see is housing saying, oh, it's not our land, we can't do it, and we're saying, oh, it's environmental land and we can't do that either. So there needs to be some join up, I think.
Yeah, there needs to be some join up things. So there is some work going on at the moment whereby, so probably an exaggerated example, but where we send a street cleaner out to clean one of our roads, and then the street cleaner goes out 2 days later to clean housing stock roads. That's a big exaggeration, but I mean, so there is some work being done at the moment to try and make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen and that we work closer together.
That's lovely. Thanks, Andrew. Cheers. Thank you, Leader.
Excellent. If you'd like to stay on the call for the moment, Councillor Redson, in case there's any other questions from elected members in relation to the committee meeting. Councillor Cox.
Yeah, I just reading and then what the concern is, and I was concerned the same as the committee about reducing staff means reducing services quality. And I think that the 3.21 and 3.31 are really important actually, because we've been running some time with a large amount of vacancies. There are a large amount of agency staff, whether they, and I think there is, and it says in there'll be a limited impact with these changes. And I think we're not getting away. We're talking about cuts. This is savings, and I don't like the word cuts. This is a saving to make it feel more efficiently. Going back to our mantra, which we got elected for, fewer buildings, better service. It's not about buildings here, but you can deliver a better service with some savings. And there's vacancies been sitting in these posts for some time. Then great staff have been working without them already. Then we just need to make sure we can use that as a saving, and that's really good. And it's not a cut; it's a saving, because then staff have been working really brilliantly over the last 4 years, and we've had a sea change in where what they put within. I'm very proud every time you go around, you can't go out and drive out during the day without seeing a team in the park or a team or someone doing something. If you can't find a pothole, and you look at the areas, you go to Buzzard or council areas, it's a sea change from between here and out when you go into Essex. And I think we're not actually talking about cuts, we're talking about savings here, and this is agency staff and mainly vacancies. And I think them 2 points do make that, and it's not being clear enough, I think, and that's what I think really needs to be said. Them 2 points, 3.23 and 3.31 are really saying this is limited impact on these changes.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that. I mean, from my perspective, I mean, if you just look at housing, like housing's had a real squeeze in terms of finances over the last few years. It's got leaner, more efficient, and across every single metric, it's now performing better than than before that financial squeeze occurred. So it's not just a case of saying, you know, if you make savings, services get worse. And housing, you can look to housing as a prime example of how things can not just stay on a par, but improve greatly during a period where you've got, you know, financial income pressures. It's about value for money for taxpayers.
I mean, it is about working smarter, not harder or as hard. And obviously some of the proposals, that using more mechanical services to clear is a really good example. Councillor, I'll bring it in a second. Councillor Redson said about with the residents, not securing their rubbish in their bins, making sure that they're not dropping rubbish in the street. It all helps. It all has an impact. We are seeing clean streets. We don't get it always right in the parks. We know that. There have been, if we had a whole year of that, there'd be one problem. One of our 50 odd parks across the borough. I would be surprised. But we are doing much better than we were, that's for sure. So it's really good work, but it is about just doing what we can. We've got current scope from 2.1, which is it's like the immediate return financial position was set out in Cabinet the 7th of July. This highlighted a £34.3 million funding gap for 22, 23, and 23, 24. We need to cut our cloth accordingly. We can't keep on putting a massive burden, even bigger massive burden on the taxpayer. That tax rises are inevitable, one would assume. But if you can't increase the income that you're getting from elsewhere, then you have to decrease your costs. Which is, it sounds quite hard and tough, but that's the financial position not only this local authority is in, but other local authorities in. I know because I looked, of course, the weekend. And there was nobody sitting there saying, well, I don't have to do this. Everybody was in the same boat. So, Councillor, okay. Great minds think alike. Councillor Redson, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, there is just one thing. I'm just gonna. I just want to ask. We've Councillor Maney and I. We've had lots of problems lately with the bins being collected on fields and parks. We've got all these solar powered, so-called, supposed to let the council know when the bin needs emptying. If we put these under trees, they're not going to catch the light, so they're not going to come up when they're full. So I think we ought to be putting them somewhere else. But have we got a rotor system, Andrew, that goes on? Because we've had a lot of bins overflowing on the park, and that ends up on the field. When the wind blows, it's all over the field, so it makes it more. Is there a rota system that they do to go round and do all bins?
So there'd be a rota system for the normal bins, but what I'll do is I will ask officers to look into and see if these bins do need moving and we're not getting the signal to say that they need emptying.
Thank you for that.
Consideration to take 8 times as much waste as a regular bin,
Yeah.
which is 8 times the weight to be ready accessible for our staff to be able to take the compacted waste out.
Yeah.
And then rather than it being in the middle of the field where they've got to go across and get eight bins worth of rubbish in one bin and drag it back. So, oddly enough, I was speaking to the head service about this not so long back, so a bit more insight on that one. Councillor Redsill, as we always do, we always welcome open scrutiny chairs to Cabinet, so thank you very much for laying the input from your committee, and if you'd like to take our thanks back to them for your next meeting, I shall be grateful, and hopefully we'll start seeing more chairs attend in this way when they see either reports that have gone to them in relation to the budget setting, or indeed any of the reports. It's much better if we actually hear it from them rather than just a sideline in the report. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Leader. It's no good complaining if we don't come here and tell you.
You never complain.
Not the point of the job.
Feedback, obviously.
Thank you, Leader. Cheers. Do you mind if I go now?
You can go now. Thank you, Councillor Redsill.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe.
And you.
Bye.
Thanks, Councillor.
So with that, are there any other questions or anything for Councillor Jeffries from Cabinet? No? In that case, I'll move on to the recommendation, which can be found at page 19 at 1.1, that Cabinet consider and approve the proposals outlined in the context of the current MTFS, which is medium-term financial strategy position. Is that all agreed? Great, that's agreed. So thank you very much for that. So with that, and just to check the time, I call this meeting to close at 19:47. Thank you. And as Councillor Redsill said, do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.